You are listening to Radio Maria Canada, a Catholic voice wherever you are.
Hello, everyone. I am Father Stephen DeCarlo. I am the Director of Youth and Vocations for the Roman Catholic Diocese of Peterborough in Ontario, Canada. And recently, I came on Radio Maria to speak about vocations to the priesthood. And as I was preparing for that talk and interview, it reminded me that we need to kind of step back and reflect on what does it mean to discern a vocation in general. As when we think of vocation, we think of priesthood, married life, a single life, the religious state. But we have to think about how do we get there? How do we start discerning our vocations? And what are the pitfalls that can trap us when it comes to vocational discernment? And so I recently prepared a talk I gave to our young adult outreach with the Sisters Poor of Jesus Christ on May 18th of 2024. And I'm here to record it and to give it to you, the listeners, over Radio Maria. And there'll be some of you who may not need to hear the entirety of this talk because you are already in your vocations. There are some who are discerning your vocation, or maybe some who know people who are discerning vocations, or even a lot of the information I present, I hope, will be of great use to anyone, regardless of your state in life or where you are in life or what vocation you found yourself in. And the title of my talk is called Discerning a Vocation in Love and Joy. But to begin, let me read from the Holy Gospel according to John. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my lambs." A second time he said to him, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Tend my sheep." He said to him the third time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus said to him, "Feed my sheep. Very truly, I tell you, when you were younger, you used to fasten your own belt and to go wherever you wished. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will fasten a belt around you and take you where you do not wish to go." He said this to indicate the kind of death by which he would glorify God. After this, he said to him, "Follow me." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Just so that you're aware, I was reading that off the screen of my computer. I don't have it memorized because I realized from you, your perspective, I was staring straight at the camera. So don't worry. It's good to memorize it, but I don't have it memorized. But in the gospel we just heard, Peter is asked, "Do you love me?" And when he says he does, Jesus tells him to feed my sheep. He says this 3 times. Why does Jesus ask him 3 times? That's because if we look earlier in the Gospels, during the Passion narrative, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. So by doing so, he sets himself outside the circle of disciples. And to restore him back to where he was, Peter had to reaffirm his love for Jesus 3 times. So he fell 3 times, so he has to rise again 3 times. Do you love me? And this is a question that's posed to us today. We are being asked, do we love God or not? Jesus was asking this question of Peter, but he also asks each of us individually. And hopefully the answer is yes. Then there's the next part, feed my sheep. If we love God, then we must feed his sheep. But what does that mean? It's very clear for those in priestly vocations what it means to feed the sheep, because as clergy, we are shepherds. But what about the rest of us? What about the rest of people? What does it mean to feed my sheep? What does it mean to be a married person to feed one's sheep? To be a single person to feed one's sheep? The phrase to feed my sheep simply means do something for me out of love. Jesus is saying, do something for me out of love. Do what I ask of you only out of love. We are given our assent that we love God, but we are also indicating that we want to do things based our love for God. We do these things because we love God. And this thing, feeding his sheep, is based on our baptism. All vocations we find ourselves in, any state of life, are based on our shared vocation as baptized believers. Let us look at the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraph 1267. Baptism makes us members of the body of Christ. Therefore, we are members one of another. Baptism incorporates us into the church. From the baptismal fonts is born the one people of God of the new covenant, which transcends all the natural or human limits of nations, cultures, races, and sexes. For by one Spirit we're all baptized into one body. And it continues to the next paragraph. The baptized have become living stones to be built into a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood. By baptism, they share in the priesthood of Christ, in his prophetic and royal mission. Baptism gives a share in the common priesthood of all believers. And continues, having become a member of the church, the person baptized belongs no longer to himself, but to him who died and rose for us. From now on, he is called to be subject to others, to serve them in the communion of the church, and to obey and submit to the church's leaders, holding them in respect and affection. Just as baptism is the source of responsibilities and duties, the baptized person also enjoys rights within the church, to receive the sacraments, to be nourished with the word of God, to be sustained by the other spiritual helps of the church. And finally, reborn as sons of God, the baptized must profess before men the faith they have received from God through the church, and participate in the apostolic and missionary activity of the people of God. So what the Catechism is trying to tell us, that basically our baptism should be the starting point of our love for God. It is the beginning of our formal relationship with God. And our love for God has to have a response to his call. Otherwise, love is meaningless. Because can you imagine a husband saying to his wife, I love you, but nothing results from that. He gives her no gifts. He doesn't kiss her. He doesn't tell people about her, or even worse, he cheats on her. Is that real love? No, that's not. Real love means action. It means fidelity. It means showing one's love to another. It means being open about what one loves. So this thing of feeding my sheep, it can mean for a married person to lead your spouse and kids, give yourself the marriage vocation. For the religious, it means you serve and live the three evangelical counsels, the vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. And for a priest, obviously, we are considered shepherds of parishes. We lead the parish. We celebrate the sacraments. We serve the people. We visit the sick, bring communion to those who can't receive it, can't come to church to receive it. We preach. And for a priest, it's a pretty obvious thing, but we have to think a little bit deeper when it comes to other vocations. But it's the same thing. We are feeding Christ's sheep, which is wherever we find ourselves doing these things for love of God. And our vocations should be based in love and respond to God's call out of love. We don't do so simply out of duty, obligation, or even fear. Yes, we have duties and obligations, and we should attend to them. But we don't do so simply out of obligation or duties. We do so out of love, from which we look at these obligations with love, and we fulfill these obligations with love. But definitely not fear. There's the fear of God, which is more of a respect for God. That's the good fear. Fear, in a sense, there's a good and bad fear. The good fear keeps us on the right path. It prevents us from entering into dangerous situations. For example, you don't go into the forest at night because you're afraid of what might be in there, and for a good reason. You don't want to run into a bear or anything that could harm you. But then there's the bad fear, and that's the fear which is not of God. That is a fear which actually puts too much on ourselves and causes us to lose hope in God and to be too afraid to do what we know is right. But I'll get to that in just a few moments. And we as human beings are called to be happy. That might sound a little odd. Do we have a right to be happy? Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But it's a happy according to God's version of happiness. It's not a worldly happiness, but God's version of happiness, which is a state of blessedness, a foretaste of heaven. When we are happy, we are basically having when we're truly happy, and when we live in a happiness that is built on our prayer life and our relationship with God, that is a foretaste of heaven. But how do we do this? It's actually kind of simple and kind of not in a way. Following our inner desires is key. It's, to be happy is not about an extraneous imposition from outside. For example, if you hate the idea of becoming a priest, if that idea just repulses you for whatever reason, that's a sign you're not called. If your desire is marriage, you truly desire to have a wife and kids, that is potentially a sign from God. But if you also have a desire for priesthood, that can also be a sign that you're called to priesthood. We're all called to happiness. And marriage is a beautiful thing. It's a lovely thing. It's something we are attracted to. But for some people, they have that. But then there's this additional pull towards priesthood in a positive sense. Find ourselves, maybe we'd be happy in priesthood or religious life. Despite this admiration for marriage, there is still that call for priesthood. We find our desires for these vocations strong, maybe stronger than marriage. That could be a sign, because all vocations are good things. There are things we should admire, but when we are find ourselves drawn to one over others, that might be a sign, because our desire is for that. Desire is a good thing, as long as we're desiring the right things. So how do we know we're on the right path? And basically one immediate easy thing to look at is a sense of joy. If you are feeling joy, it's a positive sign that you're on the right path. If we are joyless, that might be a sign you're not on the right path. Because God is love, and whatever love in you is from God. And love and joy are connected. If you are living a life of love, there should be joy. If there's joy, there should be love. And if you are feeling a strong attraction towards one pole over another, that could be a sign that God is calling you to that. And of course, we have to submit it to the church, but I'll speak on that a little bit later on. But when we are looking at our discernment, we have to also be reminded of when we are pursuing a vocation or we are looking into a discerning vocation, we have to keep in mind of there are essential things that are associated with specific vocations. That if we don't like those things, we may not be called to that vocation. We may like priesthood in general, but if you hate saying the breviary, the liturgy of the hours, for us priests, we have to say the breviary every day. If that's something you find very difficult to do or you can't do, that might be a sign. Marriage and conjugal life is a lovely thing for people once they're married to take part in, but some people would struggle with that, and that might be a sign as well. And that's why we can't discern always on our own, because as I was saying earlier, vocations themselves are all good things, so it's natural to be attracted to everything. And that's why you need to submit to the church for verification. Marriage, priesthood, religious life, even single lay ministry needs confirmation of sorts from the church, which means that we can't just, say, oh yeah, I feel attracted to priesthood, I'm going to pursue that. Well, the church discernment of every vocation is always done through the church, and what the church has laid down as guidelines for that. For example, for priesthood, if you want to discern a vocation to the priesthood, that there are certain requirements that you have to do, that there are certain impediments that we have to make sure we are not. Impediments basically are these conditions that prevent or can delay our reception of certain sacraments. For example, for priesthood, if a man is married, he has impediment towards priesthood. He can't really pursue priesthood in that. If he was, his spouse was to die, or he receives an annulment from the church, declaring the marriage invalid, that would be cleared, but there can be other sorts of things. And then I can give a whole talk on that alone. I just won't go too much into it. Or people may be attracted to marry a spouse, but there could be issues with this potential marriage. For example, maybe they're not acting with full freedom. Maybe it's considered a shotgun marriage, or maybe or more commonly, the person was married before and didn't get annulment. So that these are things that may indicate it's not your vocation. So we need to, or religious life. There are some people that may like religious life, but they're not cut out for religious life for various reasons. Sometimes people don't have, the academic skill for that because priesthood and religious life requires you to study. Maybe you can't relate to people that well. So if you live in community, that might be an issue. Um, there may be all sorts of things that can prevent that. That's why we need to submit to the church for verification, to the church itself to basically say, is this a true vocation or not? And as vocations director, I have encountered a lot of examples of that. And of course, I can't give names, but I do remember one individual who was clearly not cut out for priesthood, despite him uh, thinking he was. So a while back, I had this individual who came to me, said he was thinking of the priesthood. And I thought, oh, okay, that's good. Let's talk about it. So the more I looked into him and chatted with him, the more and more signs were becoming evident that he was not called to priesthood. I learned that he was a young man, but in his early 20s, had already fathered two children. One was already born, another was on the way. As priests, we have to be celibate, and we can't have, don't have our own children. If we were married before and we had children, those children have to be of a certain age that don't require the father, but these kids were infants. The fellow had a girlfriend, was living with his girlfriend, as I found out. Yeah, he was also sort of involved in the parish, but not really. Didn't go to mass every Sunday, so don't know why he was thinking of priesthood. His academic skills were not quite up to par. I've seen more F's on his report card than an R-rated movie, let's put it that way. Spelled Yale, if you know Simpsons, he spelled Yale with a 6. Yeah, I think he did not give himself very well to study. I think he was very lackadaisical. Like he just didn't care about school, so he just dropped out. Yeah, there were, what I asked his pastor about him and I learned he wasn't a very trustworthy person. Just all these signs just seemed the more I look into it, the worse this candidate became. So that's a clear sign of that. Or I've had other candidates with human formation issues. So basically, there's 4 pillars that we look at when trained priests. There's the academic, there's the spiritual, there's the pastoral formation, which is like how you are a leader in the parish, and there's the human formation, which is all about how is this person a person? How is this person a fully functional human being, let alone all the spiritual stuff? How is this guy as a person? This second example, he was a nice guy. I had no issues with him, and he was friendly. So he was generous, but he had a lot of human formation issues in the sense that he struggled with personal cleanliness. His room was full of garbage. He would basically bring food to his room and just leave it there. It was rotting. He had chip bags all over the place. He had, drink cartons that you just, drink out and just throw it on the floor. His bathroom was disgusting. It wasn't cleaned in weeks or months. And also he didn't shower that much. So it was the common joke that before he entered into the house, we had to spray wash him with a power washer. And this is a human being we're talking about. Why are we talking about? But he just had no human qualities that we could we could really redeem. It was so difficult for him to overcome those. A nice guy, and I wish him well, but it was just not able to apply himself to seminary, nor could he be seen as a leader, as even lay people commented on that. So though these are signs of that, and there are also signs for marriage as well. Like the marriage has certain things in canon law which determine licety and validity. I've met couples who basically they kind of feel forced in going to the marriage, and there may have been like pregnancy or stuff like that. That's where we want to like slow things down. Or if the couples are really young, that'd be a discussion to have with them. And or people going to religious life, you want to wonder, why are you going to religious life? Do you have the right intention? We've got to beware of pursuing vocations for the wrong reasons. For example, go and become a priest because of the status and honor, or at least the perceived status and honor that goes with priesthood. or marriage because one wants to satisfy their physical urges. That's not a good reason to enter into marriage, because there's a lot more to a marriage than that. That's for sure. I speak to older couples and they tell me that marriage is a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of putting up with each other's personal failures and personal shortcomings, and being patient with that. Or people who are looking at single life because they just don't want responsibilities. They view marriage as too difficult, priesthood too difficult, religious life is too demanding. So let's be single. But unfortunately, that can be a temptation to choose singleness just to avoid difficulty. And trust me, difficulty will find you. You can't run from it. It will find you. Or people enter in religious life just to be taken care of, because they do take care of you. Physically, you have housing, you have income, you have clothing, you have food, but that's not the right reason to pursue religious life, because religious life is there for you to give yourself to Christ in poverty, chastity, and obedience. So that's why we need to submit to the church for verification of our vocations. And often we need the help of a spiritual director, someone, usually a priest, though not always, basically help guide us when it comes to discerning vocations and make sure we're making the proper choice and for the right reason. So yes, we have to always be aware of why we're pursuing it and of what the church requires of us. Like seminary formation for priests requires a lot of study. We need to be able to do that. Married life, we need to be able to give ourselves into for conjugal life to have a certain maturity. Maturity is very important for any vocation, even single life, because we need adults who are mature and capable of doing things. But regardless of which one we feel ourselves called to, there's the necessity of doing something. Vocations aren't discerned at home, just inertia, just sitting at home and looking at it online, looking at all these websites and all these vocations videos. We have to go out and make steps towards discerning. That means dating, entering a seminary or religious order, speaking to a spiritual director, and so on. Get involved in your parish. It's important that we do that. I'll speak of that in just a moment, because we don't discern to apply. We apply to discern. What does that mean? That means that we don't just sit around thinking, should I do this or not? No, we do things in order to make a decision. Like we date in order to see, is this person the right spouse for me? I enter the seminary to know, is this is priesthood for me? Because we can't do it just sitting in our homes being going, we can't do that. That you can't discern a vocation that way. At least speak to a priest, at least speak to someone. That is a step. It may be a small step, but it's a step. We can't just do nothing and hope a vocation pops up. As a priest once said to me, avoid devotion to Our Lady of Perpetual Discernment, which means that we're constantly discerning. Oh, I'm discerning, I'm discerning. We do that for enough years. Have you made any steps? Have you gone any retreats? Have you made any meaningful steps? I don't think so. And also be aware of fear. We believe that perfect love casts out all fear. Perfect love casts out all fear. Unfortunately, some people are too afraid to discern because of many things. Some are genuine, others are not. A genuine thing may be, what happens if I discern priesthood, I leave my job and I can't get my job back? That's a legit fear. However, it can also be an irrational fear. If I enter, if I date this person, it doesn't work out, is it going to scar me? It may or may not, but we just have to keep going. Some fears are just irrational. What if I ask this person and they say no? Well, they may or may not. We just move on from that. What if I ask this person out and they make fun of me and they talk to people about me? That doesn't usually happen. Okay. Yeah. So we have to be on our guard against fear. Some fears are legit, but some fears are really, they're not from God. And even legit fears, we have to look at them and confront them, because they may be legit, but we can get over them. Even true fears or true concerns can be overcome. There's also the fear of missing out. Like if I discern a vocation, am I missing out all sorts of things? No, the opposite is true. Like I entered seminary and I found myself involved all sorts of ministries. I was involved in homeless ministry, in prison ministry, in hospital ministry, seniors ministry, youth ministry. Like my job now is youth ministry. I was involved in parish ministry, in Knights of Columbus. I was involved in all these things. I found that discerning vocation of the priesthood actually got me more experiences than less. And if I was to, for example, discern out a seminary, I had a lot to draw on. So actually, I didn't miss out on anything. I actually gained a lot from discernment. We don't discern just to gain those experiences, but they are helpful. Also, a lot of people have told me and spoken to me about is this fear of the past or their past. Yeah, as human beings, we're fallen and we've made mistakes, but our past mistakes should not discourage us. We believe in confession. We can make amends and be contrite and seek to do better for next time, basically. And so our past should not discourage us, and we can grow in virtue too. Just because we fell deep into sin doesn't mean we're going to be stuck in those habits. We can overcome those habits through practicing the virtues. And sometimes we also feel a little narrow-minded about our past, thinking that, oh, we've done the worst things possible. Not really, no. People that have done really bad things over history, but for the most part, people haven't done something that would really compromise their future. I'll give you one example of one person who did. Years ago, I was visiting a nursing home, and there was an elderly man there. I think his name was Warner. I'm not sure what his name was, but Warner was in the Second World War. He's from Germany, and he served in the German army. So for us here in Canada, we know this guy was automatically on the enemy side. And then I found out that he was a little more than in the German army. He was in the SS, in the Schutzstaffel. For those who don't know their history, the Schutzstaffel or the SS were like the elite military unit of the German army, and many of them were responsible for the concentration camps, for the administration and for the running of them and for many of the atrocities that occurred. Not all the SS were involved with that. I think Warner was not, but he may have been partly. He was very cagey about that. I didn't want to talk too much about it, but he had a lot of regret about his past in that because I think he knew he was involved in something very evil. But Warner was a Catholic. I think he fell away from his faith in his younger years, and later on after the war recovered it. But he was able to come to amends with his past and come go to confession and receive mercy. Oh, by the way, when I knew him is before I was a priest, so he didn't go to confession to me. This was like 10 years ago. I think he's deceased now, so I think he was dead by the time I became a priest. So yeah, I know he made amends, made peace with God, and that. So even a character like that can receive God's forgiveness. When I was at the March for Life we're still in May. I heard two testimonies from two former abortion doctors who performed hundreds, maybe thousands of abortions. But they've repented and received mercy. God's mercy is applicable to all. And if these sinners can be forgiven, so can you. So can you. One thing we have to also be aware of is that as we are sinful human beings, so we always struggle with sin, even if we're on the right path. But if a path is leading us more and more into sin, that's a bad sign. Beware, however, that we are sinful beings and will always struggle with sin, even the right vocation. Example is marriage. We are discerning marriage with a person, and we find that we're falling deeper into sin with this person. If this was truly of God, we probably wouldn't be falling into that, maybe as much. There's temptation. There is, there is a fallen human nature. But if we find ourselves on a path that's leading us deeper into sin, that might be a sign that this path is not for us. Another example, seminary life can do so. There's a lot of vainglory when it comes to seminary, which means that when we enter the seminary, we have a status, so we're a seminarian now. So some individuals can be a little bit affected by that and say, oh, now I'm a great person, and they grow in pride. So the further they go into seminary, the more prideful they become. That can be an issue. That's why when we need discernment, we need spiritual directors, we need to go to confession regularly. Yeah, yes, yeah. If you're a discerning marriage, for example, there can be falls, but if it's not a major thing or a very frequent thing, we just go to confession. But if it seems like this path is, or this person is leading us deeper into sin, that is probably a sign you're not called to that. And just to conclude, how can we, what concrete steps we can take right now? Receive the Eucharist, go to Mass every Sunday, try to go to daily Mass if you can, or maybe every other day, or, in addition to Sunday, go maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, 3 times a week. Go to adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, go to confession. If you haven't been in confession in a while, just go to it. Ask the priest. Priests love hearing confessions. If priest says he doesn't want to, just go to another priest. Go to the first priest that says yes, and then that's just go to confession to a priest. And if you don't want to go to your parish priest, just go to the next parish over. If you are close to a cathedral, just go to the cathedral. They hear like hundreds of them in the week, and yeah, they can't remember. Confessions are really boring. It's one of the most boring things we priests can do, so we don't remember your confessions that much. Also get involved with your parish. As young people, we should be involved with parish ministry. We need to be involved in these things, not because we're the future church, because we're the present, but it's also good to be involved in ecclesiastical life because it's good for our vocation. So as baptized people, we are called to be members of the parish. In conclusion, pursuing a vocation can be difficult at times, but it's also very rewarding. There's so many joys and blessings. Lifelong friends will be attained, things learned, opportunities open. But first and foremost, pursuing a vocation is about growing in a relationship with God and his church. And so we look at the example of the Blessed Virgin Mary. She responded yes to God when the Archangel Gabriel said to her and said, "Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you. You are going to give birth to the Savior. Are you okay with this?" Yeah, and she says, fiat mihi secundum verbum tuum. Let it be done to me according to your word. And so Mary didn't say, let me think about it. Mary didn't say, I have to check on this. Mary didn't say, I don't know about that. She said, yes. Now, of course, for us human beings, we need, the church, the mediation of the church. We need to speak to spiritual directors. But at the end of the day, we have to follow Mary's example. And when the path is clear, we say, yes, let it be done to me according to your word. So I wish you well in your discernments. I'm Father Stephen DeCarlo, Director of Vocations for the Peterborough Diocese. If you want to speak to me, that's fine. I'm up in Peterborough City. If you can travel there, it's fine in person. Otherwise, I can arrange Zoom meetings. But also talk to your local vocations director in your own diocese. It doesn't have to be me. It can be anyone else, or another priest, or a religious sister, or also recommend of married couple. If you discern marriage, speak to older married couples. They can guide you well in that. Or ask the vocations director; he can put you in touch with married couples. So yeah. So I wish you well in your vocational discernment, and my prayers are for you. And if you want to speak to a priest, go ahead. God bless. Bye.